All right, let's get right into it. We are living in a brand new era of AI, what some are calling the agentic era. See, we're shifting away from AIs that just follow our instructions to AIs that actually have their own goals. And that creates a massive problem. These agents are incredibly powerful, but they're also wildly unpredictable. So the real question is, how do we build AI agents that we can actually trust? Trust not to just go completely off the rails. It really all boils down to this one simple sounding question. How do you know if an AI is doing a good job? But the answer, it turns out, is so much more complex than a simple yes or no. This isn't about checking if the code ran without an error. No, this is about judging its judgment. And this analogy here really hits the nail on the head. Think about it. Traditional software is kind of like a delivery truck. It has a fixed route, a set list of stops. To see if it did its job, you just need a simple checklist. Did the package get delivered? Yes or no? But an AI agent, that's a Formula One race car, flying around the track, making split-second dynamic judgments at 200 miles an hour. You can't just use a checklist for that. You need continuous, real-time data, telemetry, just to understand if it's performing well or about to spin out. And that brings us to a really critical point. These AI agents, they introduce a completely new kind of failure. They don't just crash or give you an error message like old software. The way they fail is, well, it's way more subtle, and honestly, it's a lot more dangerous. I mean, just look at these failure modes. We are not talking about simple bugs in the code. We're talking about things like algorithmic bias, where the agent learns all the wrong lessons from its training data, leading to totally skewed and unfair outcomes. Or factual hallucination, where the AI just confidently makes stuff up, and it sounds completely plausible. Its performance can drift over time as the real world changes. Or, and this is a wild one, it can develop unintended behaviors, finding bizarre loopholes to get to its goal that we never could have predicted. These are failures of judgment, not just failures of logic. And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? Let that sink in for a minute. You cannot use a breakpoint to debug a hallucination. All our old tools, the ones software developers have relied on for decades, they're basically useless here. You can't just pause the code at a certain line to figure out why an AI is inventing facts out of thin air. We need a completely different way of thinking. So if the old way is totally broken, what's the new way? Well, it all starts by fundamentally redefining what good even means for an AI agent. And the solution is a new framework, one that's built on what we'll call the 4 pillars of quality. Four simple but powerful ideas that give us a whole new language to talk about, and more importantly, to measure how these agents are actually performing. So what are they? First up, effectiveness. Pretty straightforward. Did it actually achieve what the user wanted? Second, efficiency. Look, an agent that takes 25 winding, convoluted steps to do a simple task isn't a good agent, even if it eventually gets there. Third, and this is a big one, robustness. What happens when things go wrong? When an API it's using suddenly fails, or the data it gets is messy, does it just fall apart, or can it adapt? And finally, maybe the most important of all, safety. Does it operate strictly within the guardrails we've set? Does it respect the boundaries we've put in place? Okay, so that framework is great, right? But it immediately brings up a huge question. How on earth can we measure any of those things if the agent's reasoning is a total black box? The answer is, we have to find a way to peek inside the agent's mind. We need something called observability. And to really get this, here's another great analogy. Traditional monitoring is like checking on a line cook in a kitchen. They have a laminated recipe card, and your job is just to make sure they followed the steps correctly. It's a known process. But an AI agent? It's a gourmet chef in a mystery box challenge. They're inventing a dish on the fly. We can't just check a recipe. We have to be able to judge their entire creative process. So we have to move from simply asking, is the agent running, to asking the much deeper question, is the agent thinking effectively? The first tool we have for this is logs. The easiest way to think about logs is as the agent's diary. They are just time-stamped, factual entries of every single thing that happened, moment to moment. At 10:01 a.m., I decided to use the weather tool. It's the raw, unfiltered data of its experience. But, a bunch of disconnected diary entries isn't enough. We need traces. So if logs are the individual diary entries, a trace is the narrative thread that connects them all into a coherent story. It shows you the cause and effect chain of events, revealing not just what happened, but why it happened. It's the plot of the story. And finally, you've got metrics. Think of these as the agent's report card. They take all that granular data from the logs and the traces and they roll it up into a high-level scorecard. This is where you see the big picture stuff. Average response time, error rates, how much it's costing you to run. It's that at-a-glance view of its overall performance. So great, now we can actually see the process. But that brings us to the next question. Who or what is actually going to judge it? This is where we get into what you could call the art of AI judgment, and it requires a whole new set of tools and really a new kind of team. The strategy that works best is called outside in. Here's how it works. You start with a black box view. Just look at the final result. Did the agent achieve the user's goal? A simple yes or no. If the answer is no, if it failed, then you crack it open to the glass box view. You analyze the entire trajectory, every SOT, every tool it called, every decision it made to figure out precisely why it failed. And who's doing this analysis? Well, it's this whole new cast of evaluators. Of course, you have your automated metrics for things that are easy to count, but then you have these really fascinating new players, using a powerful large language model as a judge, or even using another AI agent to judge the first one. And most importantly, you always have a human in the loop, the person who is the ultimate decider of what's good and what's not. Now, this idea of an LLM as a judge is really powerful stuff. This is where you literally give a top-tier AI, like a GPT-4, a detailed rubric and ask it to score another agent's performance. It's an incredible way to get nuanced, qualitative feedback at a scale that no human team could ever match. It can judge things like helpfulness or tone or creativity consistently and quickly. Okay, let's put all these pieces together. We've got our pillars of quality, we've got the observability tools to see the process, and we've got our new team of evaluators to judge it. How does this all form a system that actually gets better over time? Well, it creates something called the agent quality flywheel. It's this awesome self-reinforcing loop. First, you define quality using those 4 pillars we talked about. Then, you instrument your agent for visibility so you can see everything it's doing. Next, you evaluate that process using your team of human and AI judges. And here, this is the magic part. You architect a feedback loop. Every single time the agent fails, that failure is automatically turned into a new test case for the future. So every mistake makes the entire system smarter. It just spins the flywheel faster and faster, constantly improving. And that brings us to the most important point of all. If you only take one thing away from this, let it be this. The trajectory is the truth. When we're talking about AI agents, the final answer it gives you is just the last sentence of a very long story. The real measure of its quality, its safety, and its trustworthiness, it's all found in its entire decision-making process. The question isn't just, what did you do? It's how and why did you decide to do it? That's everything.